This is North Pod, a North Melbourne fan podcast, hosted by Jason Hunt.
Stevenson with his own move. Carrington. North are in front.
Hello, and welcome back to a week in which North Melbourne cannot hurt us. It feels good, honestly. It's a bit of a relief that the season is over. It was a super long season in the end. And yeah, another unsuccessful, I suppose, season in the books for North Melbourne. 3 wins, 20 losses, and plenty to talk about going into the off-season for sure. So this is going to be the first episode in a series of kind of review podcasts ahead of another big off-season. Will certainly be lots of trade talk, lots of draft talk a little bit later on, and we certainly will be having a look at the AFLW as well. So plenty to look forward to here on North Pod, lots to get through. The first thing that we're going to start with this week, I'm just cutting myself off. We will go through a couple of news items. And actually, you know what? Let's start there, just because I know a lot of these things are going to come up organically through the rest of the conversation anyway. So I'm just going to table them now so that we can tick them off. Will Phillips has reportedly signed a 1-year contract extension. Nothing announced by the club as yet, but all reports are that's happened. So essentially now it looks as though we've locked away everyone that we want to keep. The 1-year deal obviously says that we don't have a lot of faith in him. The reporting coming out was that he wants to stick around and is committed to trying to fight for a spot in the side. And, you know, I love Will Phil. I've talked about him a lot, or certainly more than, you know, his game time is probably worth. I really hope that he can turn it around. And if nothing else, he's a great depth player for next year. It's going to be tough, I think, for him to work his way into the midfield. But by all reports, he's a super driven guy and some great leadership qualities. And I can certainly see that from him on the field. He's one of the first players to celebrate others and to encourage others on the field. So he'll stick around for another year. And that leaves the following players uncontracted: Blake Drury, Charlie Lazaro, Cooper Harvey, Curtis Taylor, Hamish Free, Robert Hansen Jr. and Tyler Sellers. I also have a feeling that Finbar Maley is also out of contract. And then coming off contracts, Taron Thomas, we know, is essentially no longer on the list, but he is. So he's not getting another one. And we know that Greenwood and Shields have retired. So, look, we'll go into a bit more depth of this in the future, but for mine, assuming that Willfield has the 1-year deal, there's 8 left uncontracted. I think of those, Maley, Hansen Jr. and Harvey would be my keepers in that order. So I think Maley deserves a bit of time to bide his time in the VFL. I know there are lots of people calling for him to debut this year. I think it was the right call just to let him develop in the VFL and see what he can do next year potentially. So yeah, I think he'll definitely get another year. And then probably one of those two in Harvey and Hansen Jr. Hansen Jr., given he was getting game time at the end of the year, would look to be ahead. I know that Cooper Harvey, there's a bit of nostalgia and a bit of nepotism in that one, but I do think there's a bit there with him potentially. So I can't see too many of them getting contracts. We're obviously going to collect a few at the draft, and I think we would look to be collecting, you know, some experience at the trade period or through delisted free agents if possible. So we've dropped 3 already. We will need to drop several more in order to bring our list size down, and then also be able to bring some players in. So that's where it's looking for the end of the year at this stage. So for mine, I'm cutting Blake Drury, Lazaro, Curtis Taylor Free, Sellers, and then maybe one of Hansen Jr. and Harvey, depending on how many you need to cut. It's just my view. We can talk more about that as things develop, but I think that's kind of where this stage of the list build is at. The other piece of list news is that, again, allegedly, it's been reported that we are either offering or have offered Jack Darling, the West Coast forward, a 2-year deal. And fair to say that there's some people unhappy with that. I totally get that. He's a man that's past his prime. He's 32 years old, so, not certainly on the wrong side of 30. And I totally get the frustration because he's not a dude that kind of seems to fit our profile. However, we do need some help up in the forward line. So if there's currently, which there is, no one on our list that can adequately play in that forward spot, or there's not many, I guess we found Teakle towards the end of the year, but he's certainly, he was filling a role. I wouldn't say he was lighting the world on fire. There is a world in which you could still play someone like Teakle and Jack Darling and Nick Larkey, and therefore you've got two options to take those marks higher up the ground, and Larkey can really stay at home. So, look, here's where I'm at with it. I don't love him as a player right now, so personally, I wouldn't be going after him. That being said, if we're able to get him for free or essentially for free, and it is literally you're going to be here and maybe play 15 games a year, and you're going to give Larkey a chop out, and you're going to show the other younger forwards how to develop, I think there's worse options out there. You would not want to be giving anything up for him, and I don't think you would be giving up much for him. I would also hope that the money's not massive. That being said, we've got money to spend. So, look, there's my take on it. It'll be interesting to see if anything actually develops there. I've no doubt that there is some talk about it. I'm just not entirely sure how certain it is and how serious it is, I suppose. So that's the North Melbourne news floating around. Let's jump into... Got a couple of topics for this episode. We're going to have a look at the North Podium and just go in detail, have a bit of a deep dive into how the North Podium ended up. If you listened to the last episode, you would already know that Harry Sheasel was the winner just on 42 votes, finished on top of the podium. Tristan Sherry, 41 votes in second position, and Luke Davies-Uniacke, 37 votes in third position. So that was the top three. I'm just going to go through a couple of stats, see if there's any interesting wrinkles in there, or I guess, any interesting observations that we can pull out of it, because, it's my votes, so it's odd to analyse your own votes, but I think there probably are, there are some interesting things that I feel like we can draw out of it. So I'm just going to go through all the vote getters here. Sorry, it's, an audio medium, so I know it's not a perfect system. There were 22 vote getters across the year, so essentially that's half the playing list, more or less. I've just listed the top three: Shees, Sherry, LDU, and then Tom Powell, 12 votes. George Wardlaw, Colby McKercher, Cameron Zerha, 11 votes. Charlie Comben, 10 votes. So there's all of the vote getters to hit double digits. And then I'm just going to whip through these. Nick Larkey, 9 votes. Jai Simpkin, Paul Curtis, 8 votes. Aidan Core and Jackson Archer, 6 votes. Bailey Scott, 4. Jaden Stevenson, Eddie Ford, 3. Blake Drury, Callan Dawson, 2. Zane Dersma, Zach Fisher, Will Phillips, and Robert Hanson Jr., 1 vote each. So they're the 22 vote getters across the year. As we discussed throughout, it was an absolute domination by that top three. And then there were those others that were in that next bracket that, had a couple of good games or featured at one end of the season but weren't able to necessarily back it up at the other end of the season. And I guess that's why we've ended up in such a poor position on the ladder, because we have had 3 consistent players all year, and really that's all. Shees, Sherry, LDU have consistently performed, and then we've had some players that have been really up and down. And I think that therein lies the problem. Or we've got some really young players. So, Colby McKercher, 11 votes, had a great first year. George Wardlaw, 11 votes, had a solid second year, I would say. Not amazing, but a solid second year. Charlie Comben, playing for his first year in defence, 10 votes. You can't ask for a lot more than that. But someone like Nick Larkey, only the 9 votes, part of that is the lack of service, but he didn't have as good a year this year as he did last year. Bailey Scott is someone that, the last couple of years has had fantastic games of football, only had 4 votes. Jaden Stevenson, 3 votes, someone that you'd expect to be getting more than that. Cam Zerha had a really slow start to the season. So there's plenty of players here that you look at and go, whether or not you agree with the way that I voted on the games, I don't think I'm that far off. Most of the time, that these numbers aren't sort of, fairly reflective of how their seasons went. So moving on to, I guess, the players who didn't poll, I guess it is interesting to have a look at, essentially it's the top 4 players on the ground. And so, the top 4 players for North Melbourne. And so you do get a sense for, who's at the very top end and who's playing consistently well. The players, therefore, that didn't poll either didn't play many games, which is quite a few, or there's a couple here that played lots of games, and I think it probably speaks to the type of player that we still need to replace on our list. So in terms of the ones that played a lot of footy, Darcy Tucker played every game, 23 games. Luke McDonald, 22 games. Liam Shields, 17 games. Dylan Stephens, 15 games. Toby Pink, 14 games. Bryn Teakle, 11. And Charlie Lazaro, 9. So of those, Darcy Tucker's a little unlucky. I can recall at least 2 games where I did consider giving him the 1 vote. The last game, he played 3 really good quarters of football, and then there was another game where he had 30-odd touches and was pretty stiff not to pick up a vote. So he's one that you go, okay, he was close once or twice to getting the votes. Teakle's come in halfway through the season, hasn't had a pre-season, and has played a role pretty well, given that. So I'm happy to give him a pass as well. But to have one of your co-captains, Luke McDonald, play all bar 1 game and not get a vote, and to be honest, I don't really recall a game that I nearly gave him a vote, does speak volumes. Liam Shields is in there playing a role, 17 games, and he's retired, so fair enough, he's moved on. Dylan Stephens played 15, and a lot of those games missed is due to form. He's come across from Sydney on a fairly nice contract, sure, as a fringe player at Sydney. Wasn't able to have the impact that we were looking for here at North. Toby Pink and Charlie Lazaro, well, different cases. Pink's come in and, again, kind of filled a role, but you would have loved to see him grab that either at the front half or the back half of the ground and try and show a little bit more. And Lazaro, unfortunately, just another year where he wasn't able to show his wares and develop. So I think that gives you a good window into the kind of players where we need to look at replacing or iterating and developing new players for those roles. Maybe Luke McDonald aside. Look, he had a better year than he did last year, and I think I will talk about him a little bit later on. The problem is, though, he's never, at the moment at least, the last couple of years, he's just not close to being in our best. And as a co-captain, whilst I don't think you actually have to be the best player, you do have to be able to grab a game by the scruff of the neck and do something. And I don't know that El Mac has that in him anymore. The other non-vote getters are mostly players that barely played. So Greenwood 3 games, Curtis Taylor had 8, so only 1 less than Lazaro, and similar in and out of the team. Riley Hardiman 3, Will Dawson 3, Griffin Logue 2, CCJ 3, Bergman 3, Biggie 3, Goda 1, Sellers 2. So all of those make sense either for injury reasons or for lack of opportunity because they're young reasons didn't vote. But those players that played all year and didn't get a vote, I think they're the sort of players that we need to be looking at replacing on the list. So to reiterate, Darcy Tucker, Luke McDonald, Liam Shields, Dylan Stephens, who we won't be replacing in a hurry given his contract, Toby Pink, Bryn Teakle, they're spots that we could upgrade. And I mean, similarly, when you look at the players down the bottom of the North Podium, Hanson Jr., Will Phillips, Zach Fisher's a bit different, Callan Dawson, Blake Drury, Eddie Ford, Jaden Stevenson, they're all players that you'd go, oh, if we could upgrade them, we'd be a better side. I left Zane Dursman out there with the 1 vote. I think it's fair enough that he's down the bottom there as a developing player, but a lot of those others, you'd go, again, could we upgrade those? And the answer is yes, but over time, isn't it? Like, you can't... We're turning over a list basically from scratch from the year 2019 or so. When you look at who was there then, it's a massive turnover. It's not something I've done the research on, but you could do it pretty close to off the top of your head. I think by the end of this season, from 2018 to when we go into 2025, it's probably going to be, Simpkin, LDU, Mac and Larkey. I'm sure I'm missing 1 or 2, but it wouldn't be many that we haven't turned over in that time. I mean, Bailey Scott would have been there. Cam Zerha would have been there. Again, beyond that, I can't think of another one. In terms of, I just then tried to have a look at the votes in a couple of other different ways, see if any other trends develop. I looked at the number of games these players polled votes in. Sheasel came out on top again on 16. So 16 of his 21 games played he polled in. So fair enough that he got the chocolates in the end. Then it was Sherry and LDU polled in 13 games each. And then, it drops off like you'd expect. Powell, Zerha and Larkey polled in 5. Wardlaw, McKercher, Comben, Curtis and Jacko Archer all polled in 4. And then down from there. So a couple of changes to the order of the total votes, but not dramatically so. It's still pretty consistent. And then there's obviously a big list that polled in 3 or 2 or 1 games, or 1 game. Not a lot to draw out of that one, but I did think it kind of franked the fact that Sheasel did win because he missed those 2 at the end. You'd have to think that he polls in 1 or 2 of those if he does play, and again, he's up to 17 or 18 games polled out of a 23-game season. So, hard to refute his win. Then I had a look at how many times each player was best on ground. And again, She's on top. She's and Sherry actually shared this one 6 each. So 12 out of our 23. So half the games, one of those 2 was best on ground. LDU was 4. So again, if you want to add those up, you're looking at 16 games between the 3 of them. Wardlaw 2, Simpkin 2, Powell 1, Comben 1, Aiden Core 1. So not a lot of variety in the best on ground. Again, speaking to those 3 dominating. Those 2 games that Jai Simpkin was best on ground in were the only 2 he polled in as well. One of them was a win. The West Coast win was his first polled game for the year. Just interesting to look at. The best on ground count is probably, I look at it a little bit differently to say how many players are voting across the year, because I do think ideally you want your best players being best on ground because it means they've played really well and they're going to have a massive impact on the game. So I don't necessarily think you need to see a massive spread there. But again, to see 16 out of 23 coming from 3 players is a bit of a concern. And then the last thing I tried to have a look at in these votes, sort of split the year into 2 halves. It was easier to think about the first half of the year because I had the podium developing as we were going. So I more so just looked at if we forgot the first half of the year and just looked at the second half of the year, kind of what that looks like. And the only real major things, Zerha came good. 10 out of the 11 votes that he polled were in the second half of the year after the bye. And conversely, Tommy Power was kind of the opposite. He had 2 votes in the second half of the year, 10 in the first half. So those 2 kind of swapped and played half a season each, which, is kind of the way that North Melbourne rolls at the moment. All of Simpkin's 8 votes were in the second half, his 2 best on grounds. And similarly, I thought that his second half of the year was better than his first. And if we were ranking just based on after the bye, it was a Tristan Sherry win, 24 votes, She's 21, LDU 19. So beyond that, there wasn't too much more I could draw out of it. I will post the full standings on social media so you can see it rather than having to try and remember what I'm saying. It's not super well suited to an audio medium, but I just thought it was interesting to do a bit of a deep dive. And again, I just want to congratulate the She's on a fantastic season and a well-deserved North Podium win or podium finish. Sherry and LDU really, really tried their best to run him down, but couldn't quite get there. And Sherry just missed in that last game, was pipped for best on ground. So next up, we're going to have a look at my over-under predictions that I made at the very start of the year. It was the first podcast I made for the year. I ended up making 39 predictions. One of them is going to be cancelled out, I'll talk about in a minute, and one we're still waiting on because it relates to Brownlow votes. But we can go over 37 predicted over-under results. I'm going to whip through them pretty quickly because I want to be conscious of your time, but always interesting to see how you go. I think we all feel like we're experts at the start of the year, and I'm just, I guess, trying to hold myself a little bit accountable, but also it is interesting to look back at kind of what mindset we were all in at the start of the year because, I would say I was a pretty realistic, pessimistic person going into the year, but when I looked back at these, there was a few that I went, I was expecting a lot from this player or that player or from the side in general. So It's easy to say that in retrospect, I suppose, after we've had the year that we've had. So let's start whipping through them. The first batch are about the team in general. So the first one was 1.5 North Melbourne wins going into the bye, and I predicted over. Unfortunately, we had 0 wins, so definitely incorrect on that one. We should possibly have been on 2, or at least on 1. We should have beaten Freo in round 2. Got a massive lead on them and blew it. And then, at that point in the year, it would have been great to beat the Hawks. We were both 0-5 going into the game against the Hawks. But besides those 2 games, we really didn't look like winning anything until the bye, unfortunately. It was a really shocking first half of the year. The Freo game was the only game where we looked like winning, really, to be honest. We played a solid first game against GWS, and after that, it was shocking. So that definitely is an incorrect prediction. However, I did predict the next one correctly. 4.5 North Melbourne wins for the season. I went under, and it was under. We finished with 3 wins, all coming in the second half of the year. You could certainly argue we should have had 2 or 3 more, though. I mean, I just mentioned the Freo game. We lost that Pies game by 1 point, where, again, we had a massive lead. And that second West Coast game, I still don't know how we lost. We could have ended up with 5 or 6 wins. Alas, we did not. 3 wins, and so my pessimism was rewarded there. Under was the correct one there. 16.5 position on the ladder. So essentially, I said we would be under 16.5. We'd be 17th or 18th. That was correct. We finished 18th. Unfortunately, for our fifth time in a row, finishing 17th or 18th, which is pretty depressing. Percentage is 75. I went over. We were well under. Under by a long way, 63.5%. So essentially 10% lower than that line. It was 68.3 before we got belted in the last 2 games. So we dropped nearly 5 whole percentage points in those last 2 games. We still would have been under, so that's definitely an incorrect prediction on that one. Similarly, I thought for average score 4, 72.5, I thought over. I thought we'd be able to score a little bit better. Unfortunately not. We were at 70, so we were under that line, similar to last year, which we averaged 72 points a game. Better than the year before, we were only averaging 60.7. That 2022 year was an absolute shocker. But yeah, under. We unfortunately went slightly backwards with our scoring on average this year. I certainly, again, unfortunately got the next one correct. So average score against 90.5. I said over. I knew that it wasn't going to be a great year defensively, and it was a shocker. We were well over. 111 was our average score against, much worse than previous year. Pretty similar to 2022, where we averaged 109 points against. So, yeah, a really poor year defensively, but I think, we all knew that going in. Again, another one relating to scoring that I unfortunately got correct. We score 100 or more points as a team 2.5 times. I went under. Last year, we only went over 100 once. This year, the same. Just the once against the Pies. Ironically, in a game that we lost, we scored 118 points, but the Pies scored 119. We also scored 97 in a loss to the Weagles. So our 3 wins, we weren't able to score over 190 against the Tigers, 87 against the Suns, and 47 against the Eagles. So that definitely is going to be a key to us having some more success in the short to medium term, is getting our scoring or getting that score above 100 more often. We've got to figure out ways to be more efficient going inside 50. That's absolutely nothing new to any of you listeners. So yeah, another bad scoring year. This one is an interesting one. It was closer than we thought it would be. 2.5 All-Australian 44-man squad members. That's a bit of a mouthful. I went with under, and it was under, but just. We had Shees and Sherry in the 44-man squad. Last year we had just one in Larky, and then before that you have to go all the way back to 2019 when we had Cunners and Ben Brown in there in the 44-man squad. We know, unfortunately, both of them missed out on the All-Australian, which, look, I tweeted about it on the evening. It's not surprising. It's just a little bit disappointing. Would have loved Sherry in particular. I think, given he's really only competing with Gawn, I think he was really unlucky. Gawn definitely got the consistency award or the reward for consistency there. I have no doubt that if Sherry backs up what he did this year again next year, he's well in the running for All-Australian. It's just how it works. You've got to have a bit of a body of work to point to. So got that one correct, but it was closer than it might have been. There's every chance. I would imagine LDU would have been, probably in the 50th or 60th spot. So we're actually close to going over on that one, but another correct one. Then we go to our marks inside 50. 10.4 marks inside 50 per game. I thought we could go over that. Unfortunately, we could not. Just 9.7. So we were, 0.7 of a mark per game off that. Slightly better than last year, but not a good number again. We've definitely got to get that pushing above 10, and that'll come with our efficiency inside 50. So I was incorrect on that one. We were under. Our tackles inside 50, I said 10 tackles inside 50 per game. I thought under, and unfortunately I was correct. We were 8.4, which is down from last year, which was 9.1. We are the lowest or the worst side at tackling inside 50 in the AFL again for at least the third year consecutively. And besides Paul Curtis, who is a really good tackler inside 50, we just don't have anyone that consistently lays tackles in there. It's one of the reasons our efficiency is so bad, because when we don't kick it well in, it just balloons. I don't think that's the right word. Ricochets straight back out, unfortunately. So that is definitely an area that we need to improve. I'm not happy to be correct about that prediction. Next one, 39.5 players used for the season. I thought over. I thought we would use most of the players on the list. We ended up using 39, so I was one away from being correct, but it was under. We used 43 last year, so I was kind of going on that, but we did not have Taron Thomas, obviously, a bit of a weird one, but he did not play Maley, Free, Payne, Harvey, George, or Goad. None of those were able to crack it for an AFL game. You would think that Braden George probably would have got a game in the second half of the year if he hadn't unfortunately done his knee. I certainly expected that Cooper Harvey would get a game, and when I made this prediction, I certainly thought that Taron Thomas would be getting a game. So there's where it all went wrong for me. I'll blame Cooper Harvey and Braden George for just getting that one wrong. So that's all the team ones. Then we move into some player predictions, and this is one that we can't yet evaluate. Sheasel receives 9.5 Brownlow votes. I have gone with under. I'm feeling pretty good about that, given we won so few games. I just find it hard to believe that he's going to be able to collect 10. Look, you never know. Maybe he will, but he only polled 3 last year. I'd expect him to pick up a couple of 1s and 2s. So, look, we will see, but I think I'm feeling good about that one. Nick Larkey kicks 62.5 goals. I took the under. It was certainly an under on that one. 46 he kicked for the year, which, was down from last year's 71, but still second best for his career. I think a big part of it was that he was marking it further up the ground, particularly earlier in the year when Teakle and Pink weren't playing forward. He was being forced to play a lot further up the ground. We saw Paul Curtis playing deeper for longer periods. And interestingly, he had more marks this year, 99 marks to his 97 marks last year, so pretty much the same number. That says to me that he's got it getting the same amount of ball, but he was having to push further up the ground and away from the goals in order to make that happen, because it wasn't due to an inaccurate goal-kicking year for Nick. That wasn't the reason for his lower number. It was just where he was getting the footy, and a big part of that, again, was the way that we were moving it. So a correct prediction for me, but one I would have liked to be wrong about. George Wardlaw plays 16.5 games. I took the under. He played 18, so pretty close, but I was more coming at it from the perspective of his hamstring issues last year. The only thing that really slowed him down was concussions, so that was definitely incorrect. Another George Wardlaw one that I got wrong. George Wardlaw lays 6.5 tackles per game. I took the over, and he was well under 4.3, which was down on his number from last year. It's interesting because I do think that he still had a really good ferocious attack on the footy, but maybe, to be honest, he was getting to the footy first a little bit more often than he was last year, and therefore had less opportunities to tackle. Maybe I'm reading that too much into it. He only played 8 games last year, so a bigger sample size this year. Perhaps he has had a couple of good games the year before, but yeah, another incorrect one. Zane Dersma, our new draftee, 7.5 games. I took the over, and he did take the over. Played 13 games. I personally didn't think that he'd be playing immediately, but he did. He played 10 of the first 11 and then 3 of the later season games to collect his 13. Showed some really positive signs, but just found it really hard to, stay involved in games. Had, I think, 3 games where he was able to kick 2 goals, which, in a North Melbourne dysfunctioning forward line is quite tricky, but yeah, just wasn't able to build that consistency, and I think he'll really benefit from a second preseason at AFL level. Here's one that I've chosen not to evaluate. Taron Thomas averages 21 disposals. I took the over for what it's worth, but as we know, he didn't end up actually making it to February, really. So I've given myself a pass or a no score on that one. Jaden Stevenson kicks 30.5 goals. I took the under. I didn't think it would be this bad. Just the 8 goals from 12 games this year for Jaden Stevenson. So well under that 30.5 goals mark. Similar to Dersma, played early and late, played the first 10 or so games and then a couple of games late. But the middle part of the year there found himself in the VFL. He then came back and played a hybrid forward back role. Played a bit of wing as well when he returned at AFL level. Super, super interesting to see what happens with him in the future. There were some rumours that he was going to retire based on his exit interview with the club, but those have been quashed, and it's more of an issue of how's he going to find a role that works for him in the side next year is the big question, because it sounds as though his exit interview was not glowing, and fair enough too. He did not have a good year, Jaden Stevenson. Colby McKercher averages 19.5 disposals. I took the under. He was well over, so power to him. I told myself that Shees had a phenomenal year, and that was sort of a bit of a one-off for a new player. And whilst the Kirch wasn't quite as good as Shees, he was still really, really great off halfback. Averaged 23.8 disposals, so well over that 19.5 mark. Not quite as prolific or as impactful as Shees, but who is in year one? Still a fantastic year, and I guess proved me wrong a little bit. We know that those possessions in the back line can be a little bit cheap, and it can be a little bit easier to accumulate, particularly if you're kicking out. But I thought the Kirch was really good with his drive, and is going to be a super player. Jai Simpkin is one I was backing in to play some midfield time and bounce back a little bit, and I think in the second half of the year we saw that. Not so in the first half of the year, unfortunately. So the line for him was averages 25 disposals. I took the over, but he was averaging 21 disposals for the year. Played predominantly forward early on and then moved more into that hybrid role. Did kick some goals, which was fantastic. And like I said, the second half of his year, he did improve. It's also hard to know to what extent those concussions impacted him that he had the first part of the year. Look, I don't think we'll ever know, but it was hard not to think that he was at least somewhat impacted when we were watching him earlier in the year. So under on that one, unfortunately. Paul Curtis is one that I got correct. The line was 19.5 goals for the season for him. I took over, and he was well over 30 goals, played every game. Had a pretty consistent year, Paul Curtis. Still some glaring holes in his game. He gives away free kicks like they're going out of fashion. But had a great year in front of goal. A bit of the yips really early on, but 30 goals is a great return for a small forward or a medium forward in his third year. Will Phillips, unfortunately, I really thought that this was his year to break out. Will Phillips averages 4.5 clearances per game. I took the over. That was certainly optimistic. He's half that. He was at 2.3. Struggled for a consistent role for most of the year, really. Played 11 games, did a bit of a tagging role. It's one of those funny ones where he only played 2 or 3 really hard run-with games, but the media talks about him now as though, he's played the whole year as a tagger. Certainly not the case. I still like him as an inside mid that, could potentially run both ways. But we're going to need more than 2.3 clearances a game from Will Phil if he's going to stick around. Liam Shields plays 14.5 games. I took the over, and it was over 17 games. So a nice little win for me, and he goes out and retires. CCJ, oh, this one's rough. CCJ averages 4.5 marks per game. I took the under. It was under. He averaged 2.3 marks, but we know injured his Achilles in round 3 and hasn't been seen since. So it's a win, but a bit of a hollow win on that one, and he wasn't looking good at the start of the year either, CCJ. It's one of those really unfortunate injuries, to be honest. Like, you're super out of form and you get injured. It's a long way back for CCJ to come back from, unfortunately. Tristan Xerri averages 2.3 marks. I took the over, and I just would like everyone to know that I took the over on that. I did back him in. He was over 2.9 marks a game for Xerri, so a much better number than previous years. He also averaged nearly a contested mark per game, 0.9 contested marks per game. So look, I'm not about to say that those are the numbers of the best player in the AFL, but I did back him in, and we know he had a fantastic year. So a correct prediction on Tristan Xerri there. I'm so pleased for him. Tommy Powell, on the other hand, is one that I got wrong in the preseason, no doubt. I thought it was going to be Will Phil, then Tommy Powell, then Charlie Lazaro. It turned out, really, in all honesty, to be Tommy Powell, then Daylight, then probably Lazaro, and then Will Phillips. Tommy Powell plays 10.5 games. I took the under, and Tommy Powell played every game. So he can tell me to cop that, and I will have to cop that. Certainly his best and most consistent year for the club, Tommy Powell. Bailey Scott averages 24.5 disposals per game. I took the under. It was under. He averaged 20.3, and this is another one of those ones where I don't like to be correct because he had a down year, unfortunately, Bailey Scott. It's not the year that we wanted from him. Braden George, 9.5 games. I took the under. He played 0. So I have to, I guess, take the win. We know that he was injured in the early part of the year, unfortunately. I get the sense that he would have played some footy in the second half of the year if he had not got injured, but I do have to take the win on that. LDU averages 30.5 disposals per game. I remember at the time putting a caveat on that and saying there are only 4 players in 2023 rather, that were able to average more than that. So I took the under based on that. He did come in under at 27.7, so I was correct. Interestingly, Harry Sheasel was very close to breaking that. He had 29.8. And this time there were, this time 5 players who broke 30.5 disposals on average per game. Adam Treloar, Sam Flanders, Lockie Whitfield, Nick Dacos, and Tom Green. The only players that averaged more than 30 disposals per game for them. So interesting to see a couple of those repeating in Tom Green and Nick Dacos. Really, really super accumulators, but I was correct on the LDU prediction. He had a super year, but not the elite of the elite, as it were, unfortunately for us. And then part of that, I got the next one wrong. LDU averages 6.5 clearances. I said over. He was just under at 6.3. So very close, but I was incorrect on that one. Similarly, incorrect on the next one. Cam Zerha kicks 32.5 goals. I took over, and he kicked 29 for the year. So just missed, but he only missed the one game. He had a really slow start to the year, which did cost me, unfortunately. So another one incorrect there. The last 2, I'm going to say serious, but trust me, I've got some air quotes happening there. Predictions. Griffin Logue returns in round 15.5. I took the over, and it was over. It was round 19. And finally, Eddie Ford averages 5.2 marks per game. I took the under. It was under. He averaged 4.1 marks per game. And I think Eddie Ford is a super interesting player going into next year. I have really no idea about what to expect from him. We've given him a short contract extension, which says that we're not completely sold on him long term. And look, fair enough. He does need to add some elements to his game in order to cement a spot in that forward line. That is all of the quote-unquote serious predictions. Then there's a couple of fun ones here that we'll just whip through to finish up. 3.5 Aiden Core highlights. I took over, and whilst I haven't gone through and counted what that would look like, I think it's definitely over. There was plenty. He had several ankle breakers. There was the bench press push on Bo McQuarrie that sent him into next week. Couple of great shutdown rolls and 1v1 wins. I think It's absolutely fair to say that we've had 4 or more Aiden Core highlights this year, so I'm taking the yes on that one. 5.5 Luke McDonald games where the fans are asking for him to be dropped. I took the under, and I similarly am going to give myself the win on that. However, I just think the talk has shifted slightly. Last year, the talk was, we need to drop him. I think there was a lot less of that this year, but it was more so, we can't have this bloke as our co-captain, which, I think I can see that perspective. But I do think there were less games, or very few games, where people were calling for Luke McDonald's head. Just similarly, not a lot of games where we were spruiking him as a fantastic player within that game. This next one is probably my biggest miss out of all of them. Taron Thomas, 9.5 games until a scandal. And look, I took the over. I thought it would be after the bye. I thought that was the danger zone. As we know now, he did not even make it through January. So definitely an under on that one. Unfortunately, Charlie Comben has 2.5 separate injuries which preclude him from playing. I took the under, and that was correct. In all honesty, he only had one game missed through injury, that last game. He had a couple of injuries that are contributing to that, but yeah, he missed the first couple of games for the year, just building through the VFL, and then only was injured for the last game. So I'm taking a success on that. Charlie Lazaro plays 2.5 games as the sub. I took under. Unfortunately, he was the sub 4 out of his 9 games. So that one is a loss. He was sub round 5 against the Cats, round 6 against the Hawks, round 9 against the Suns, and round 11 against Port. So can't take the win on that one. And the final prediction, Kane Corn's number of unnecessary snipes and articles against North Melbourne for the year, 27.5. I took the over, and look, we're not going to count that one, but I think we know that one's over as well. I actually don't mind a bit of Kane Corn's work, to be honest, just from the perspective. You just have to not take it too seriously. You have to take it with a grain of salt. Take it knowing that he's always going to say, something that has elements of truth in it, but not necessarily in the most truthful way. Anyway, there's my 5 cents on Kane Corns that you didn't ask for. And so therefore, out of the 39 predictions, we're sort of taking 2 of them out of it. The 37 remaining, 22 correct for me, 15 wrong. Better than 50-50, therefore I am the oracle and the best knower of all things football. Yeah, as I was going through and ticking and crossing, I wondered if there was a point where it was going to become pretty close to 50-50, and therefore I may as well have just flipped a coin. A few of the over-unders did make it a little bit easy for me at the end. Or not at the end, rather, but more so that some of them were, I think, pretty obvious over-under picks. So that's probably on me. I did pick most of the lines. I got a few people to help me out on Reddit, but for the most part, I was picking, what I was going to be setting up against. And so, yeah, look, I think 22 out of 37 is not a bad return. I'm confident that I'll be right on Shees as well, which will give me 23 out of 38. So not bad at all for someone just giving their predictions a crack. And so that's going to bring this episode to a close. Stay tuned for the next couple of weeks. Like I said, plenty of content still to come. Going to be talking AFLW. We're going to be talking season review. We're going to look at player reviews. Potentially 1 or 2 guests on the podcast in the coming weeks. So plenty to look forward to. And let's stay positive, North fans. Let's watch some good quality AFL finals. Let's watch some AFLW, and let's enjoy the fact that North Melbourne can't break our hearts on the field, or at least the men's side can't break our hearts on field for a good 6 months or so. Go North. Thanks for listening to another episode of North Pod. If you give me a rating or review on your podcast service, that would be much appreciated. And please follow me on all social media at North Pod Show. I'm on X or Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and I'm also very active on the North Melbourne subreddit. Hope you'll join me for the next episode.